This is Beyond Perception, where it's all about breaking out of a limited understanding, a limited perception on life, and waking up to our human nature, true self, and to our connectedness with all life. I'm Simon Rilling, and I have the true pleasure to be here today with Scott Tennant. He is a CEO, entrepreneur, philanthropist, and angel investor. And with the Tennant Institute for Integrative Medicine and the Senergy Medical Group, he, together with his father, Dr. Jerry Tennant, the author of Healing is Voltage, they have and are pioneering healthcare from sick care to wellness, rejuvenation, and longevity. It is a true pleasure to have you here. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
As just said, from what I understand, you and your father are really about disrupting the healthcare industry. And before we talk about what you are doing right now and how that works, I would love to hear a bit about your personal, but also your father's background, your discoveries, and really how you both came to where you are right now.
Sure, sure. Well, my dad graduated from high school when he was 15 or 16, and was always just a thinker and would think outside the box, and wanted to leave a small town and get out there and really help people. So he went to college, became an ophthalmologist to help people with their vision. Had a great career at that and learned how to speed up the healing, do a surgery better and quicker, and do outpatient surgery so they could actually go home and heal at home and not be in a hospital, all in the care of the patient. So I started working with him when I was 14,
Oh, wow.
and it was amazing, and I loved it. And to get out of school and try to get to the office as soon as I could, because the magic of seeing people come in that could not see, and then to be able to work with them, do the surgery, take the patch off, and then when the cataract was gone, they would see.
Yeah.
It was amazing, and it would give you this rush of excitement that you got to see them see for the first time in a while. And it was like a hit of adrenaline every day to see. So I would rush to try to do that. So he became one of the 13 people that did the study for LASIK. That became LASIK eventually. It was PRK back then, excimer laser surgery to get rid of glasses, and purely a cosmetic surgery, just to get rid of your glasses. But people loved it because they got rid of these horrible glasses. The thing we didn't know was that some of the cells were so very small they would go through the mask. And so he got 13 known viruses in his brain, and had to stop practicing. So, I moved on and helped some other doctors. But what happened was the doctors didn't know what to do. And they said, well, there's not much we can do. We can help you look and feel good, as things progress, but there's not much we can do. You're just not going to make many platelets, and you'll eventually pass. To him, as being a researcher and thinking outside the box, he said, this does not make sense to me. There has to be something. There has to be a correlation with what you had, what you have, what you do, and how you move forward, and at least manage it well. There was nothing that they knew. So he started looking, and as he got sicker and sicker, he was awake about every 6 hours, and just kind of worked through. So we got to see all of these things happen. Um, One day he came in and he said, I think I found it. It's frequency. We raised the voltage in the body. And I noticed something in his face that was different. There was a light back. And again, that was one of those things that sparked a little bit of adrenaline with me, where I said, oh my gosh, this is what I want. This is what I want to see. And I want to see that daily. So he said, I think we need to start a business that actually helps people. So we did. We started Senergy Medical Group, and the clinic, and started treating people to help with their wellness.
And
I think we might have a glitch in the system. Are you there?
yes, I'm here. I'm here. Yes. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Oh, there you go. Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah,
Yes.
we will cut that one. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Where should I start back?
Basically, it was fine. Yeah. You basically were talking about that you started a business. Yeah.
Sure. Sure. So that's kind of where we started. We went from, we wanted to get people well.
And yeah, it's an incredible story. And from what I understand, your father has been with this disease for 7 years, like quite a long period. And
Yes. Yes.
what I was wondering, how was that for you to like see your father being in that situation, and then also when your father discovered a solution to his disease, was it an instant recovery? How can I imagine that?
Sure. Once we started, found basically the root cause, which was basically it was his spleen that everything sort of attacked. Then we were able to start doing things to try to, work on the body, give it frequency, raise the voltage. So it wasn't immediate, but you started to see the progression to wellness fairly quickly.
Mhm.
He had lost a lot of weight, was very, very pale. Um, much like you would think someone who was just not well. Couldn't think of things. So as he started to come back and got rejuvenated and started thinking of more, that also the mental, helped him move forward. And then just the dream of helping others, help push you forward. So you started to see the change fairly quickly. People on the outside may not have seen it, but we did, because every day was something new. Um,
And but yeah, and from what I understand, your father was really at the peak of his career when that happened, and like, and like, and he kind of like at yeah, being a senior, almost
yeah,
started a new whole area of expertise, and
yes, it was pretty amazing because PRK LASIK was just at the beginning of getting FDA approval in the United States. Canada had already approved it. So it was right at that point where that was getting ready to be a huge industry, and that's when he retired. And so it was quite a letdown, to not be he did the research and then wasn't able to participate. Um, but I think that gave him again another piece of a push to move forward. Just that, well, that's done. And it really was interesting that he said to me, and it made sense. He said, I help people see. Now I get to help people live. And it was like the next chapter.
mm,
It was the next chapter. And that's what I got, from growing up, is that, we always looked for a different way of thinking outside the box. And I thought, wow, I get it. I get the teachings, I get the learning, and I get to always look and always find something, because it might not be exactly where you're looking, but if you just keep looking and maybe look just a little different view, the answer may be there. you know think outside the box. It could be there, beyond perception, like you said. It's that little, that extra look, the interest. And I think also, it goes back to, the charity and, philanthropy and things that, I love. um it's that heart. I think that's a lot of the piece too, that, there's knowledge, and then there's a heart. There's the wanting and the yearning to help, which gives you a different place to look from. And we've noticed that a lot of that in dis-ease, that they're not at ease, and emotions, feelings, traumas, those sort of things can make you ill in a way, or in dis-ease. And it's another place we also look, because a lot of times you have to help people through the traumas that they've gone in the past that got them, beat down, so to speak, a bit, or things they do to their self, especially when they get sick and they don't feel that their healthcare professionals listening to them,
mhm, mhm,
especially when it's something like fibromyalgia. A lot of people, they say, you're depressed. Um, it's not real. You're imagining these things. What we find is no, pain is real. There's not a pill that can take care of everything. So, fibromyalgia is just a group of things that they don't know what it is. They throw it all in there. But when you start to break it down and say, tell me your pains, um, tell me what you're feeling, what you're going through, what times of day, you just break it down in different ways, ask different questions. You'll get different answers. And don't prejudge, really. Um, when you start looking for the root cause, there's something there. You almost have to look for the patterns. And when you find the patterns may just tell you the story. Um, One of the things we notice is that, when people start to talk, is when you look at their organ meridian system, a lot of times their pains, they say this shoulder hurts, this hip hurts, this, I have this pain here, or I have a headache this time of day here. Um, when you start to look at those things and you say that's on a certain meridian, like his was on his spleen, or you look at the liver or the kidney or the lung or the heart,
Mhm.
and then you overlay all the other information you have, say blood tests, urine tests, what they eat, their allergies. You start to look at these things and then you start to see the patterns. A certain time of day is the time that your heart resets or your gallbladder resets. And you start to see and you say, it's your liver, it's your gallbladder. A lot of times the patient will say, that's it. Nobody's ever told me that before, but, and then the story comes out about what happens. I was in an auto accident, damaged my liver. My liver functions at 70% of normal. And I've actually heard this story. And this lady, she said, I've been to doctors all over the world. Some of the names everybody knows, and nobody ever knew it was my liver. She said at 7 years old, I was in an auto accident. It damaged my liver. So from there on out, they said, there's nothing to do. You will always function at 70% or lower. So she'd go to a doctor, anybody, they'd look at damaged liver at 7 years old, function at 70%. They would literally take her blood tests, her urine tests, whatever that had any indication of how the liver functions and put an X through it because it was damaged. Then they would go along and they'd say, oh, well, your migraines, we don't know what it is. Maybe it's stress. Maybe you're depressed. Maybe you have fibromyalgia, which we don't know what that is. So, again, you're depressed. So they were aiming completely different. She said, no, it hurts here when I do this. When we looked at and we said, it's your liver, look at these enzymes, look at these things. Look at the times a day you say this happens. That's when the liver is resetting because it's a diurnal clock. It has a good time and a bad time, a wake time and a sleep time. And that's non-scientific, but it's just resetting itself. Um, and when you look at it, she said, well, of course it is. It's my liver and I was damaged. If we can make the liver function the best it can, then we'll see what happens with your symptoms. Well, 2 weeks later, after her treating herself and doing protocols and taking care of herself and functioning or really looking right there at the liver, 2 weeks later, there was a different person. The pains magically disappeared. They didn't magically disappear. Her doctor said, well, they magically disappeared. How wonderful you found something magical, but it's not your liver. No, it is your liver. It's just looking at a different place.
Hmm. That- yeah, it's super interesting. When I listen to you, and what comes to me is that you're really about looking at the root cause or discovering the root cause instead of treating symptoms, and that's somehow tied to the voltage in a cell, in an organ, in the body.
Yes. Yes.
Could you uh, could you explain a bit like what does that mean if you talk about frequency or voltage or energy? What can I imagine
Sure.
behind that?
Sure. Without getting too technical, this is the easiest
Yeah.
way I think to explain it. A normal cell in your body functions at a minus 25 millivolts,
Hmm.
and that's just where it functions and it's happy. Um, when you get injured, let's say you hit your thumb with a hammer, it's going to get red and swollen and hot. So if you're charging your standard engine car with battery, the 12-volt battery, it gets hot. The charger becomes hot. It's transferring the voltage into the battery, and it gets hot. So your thumb, after you hit it, starts to get hot because it's calling in what it needs to heal to get it back to normal.
Mhm.
When it starts to heal, it's going to drop back down to minus 25 because it says I'm done. Back to heal. It's no
So
longer hot. It's
so the healing process is about adding voltage.
yes,
Mhm.
yes, yes. You have to give it the voltage to it to work. So like the 12-volt battery in the car, if you go out and you turn on the car and it's under, it'll just click and tick and won't do anything. If it's dead, completely zero, you get nothing. You turn the key and there's nothing. So you got to charge it up to get it really charged up so it can call in what it needs to get the car started or the cell started or get it functioning. So, and that's an individual cell, but then you look at it in an organ system and you say, if the lady with the liver, it has a problem, you get it up to 25 millivolts, it's functioning normal. You might have to get it a little higher for it to start to function and start to heal what it can. Hers was damaged, obviously. So we got it up to where it can function properly. You just keep it in the minus 25 millivolt range and it starts to function as best it could. Now, if you get below minus 25, say minus 3 or 5, it's degenerative. It's not doing well and it's going backwards. So it's just a degenerative organ. We found that if it flips to a positive millivolt, that's when cancer shows up. So you definitely don't want it flipping into the opposite polarity, because a lot of people know if you get a battery that you flip to polarity, it will never recharge. A rechargeable battery won't recharge after it's flipped to a positive polarity. Once it goes to zero and past, it's done.
So it's
And yeah.
So it's really about maintaining that minus 25 millivolt level, and neither too much above or too much below is good for health.
Yes, yes. And what really makes it sort of easy to think of is there are things that are voltage stealers and there's things that donate voltage to you. Good clean water would donate voltage to you and your body. Um, you know, Junk food, especially here in the United States, it's really rampant. But a greasy, burger, that's bad, that's
Mhm.
fake cheese, all of those things are stealers. So what happens is people go along in their life and they start choosing things that are stealers from them, and they add more stealers than they do donors. And then, not only are they getting older, but they're not giving their body what it needs to be able to hold a charge or give it a charge. We wear plastic soled shoes now. We don't
Mm.
walk on the grass with our feet. That's a donor. To go outside and get sun is a donor. The only time it turns bad is when you get a sunburn.
And
But sun gives you vitamin D.
one question though, if you say water is a donator or also grounding, walking barefoot, could you get too much voltage through eating or drinking like normal good water, or is that
Yeah,
also has a charge in itself, which is balancing your
I don't think so. We don't really see any of that. It's not like a radiation kind of thing. Typically what we've noticed is, especially with our devices, if we put the voltage in one area and it's not really needed there, it'll just sort of, go about the body and start to raise something else.
okay.
Certain frequencies work better with certain organs or certain places. It's more of a song that it recognizes, so to speak,
Mhm.
without getting technical, but and it gives the frequency that thing needs to resonate, to be able to charge the voltage. And then there's certain things it doesn't like. A lot of people remember uh, Ella Fitzgerald in the 60s and 70s when she would sing a certain note and the glass would break.
Mhm, mhm.
Same idea. That was something that she would sing the exact note that glass would need for it to start to vibrate, for it to shatter. So, and that's another way of thinking about frequency. That was using it in destructive.
Mm.
We think that the person, Royal Rife, that's what he was doing. People have studied him before, where he would put in a certain frequency in the body, and it would be the frequency of, say, uh, you know, the influenza virus or something, and he would resonate till he got that to be the same, and it would shake and break up the influenza virus because it was just like Ella Fitzgerald with the glass.
Mm. Mhm,
So
mhm.
that's using it in that phase. The other voltage is just giving voltage in to raise up the organs. So it's how you use, the frequency and the voltage to get it where it needs to be.
And if we quickly talk about the food, you mentioned junk food, burgers. I guess that relates to all processed food to some extent. Is that
Pretty much, yes.
that the
Yeah,
food or the product is losing voltage the more it is processed?
pretty much. It's just, the body takes a lot of time, and, it's just not well. Um, I like to tell people, if you think um, of life like this, again, just getting in a conversation with you, and it's easy to tell the masses that if you consider most of us are born with a full brick wall, you know, there's
Mm.
nice, pretty bricks, and we're pretty healthy. We're running along, and then things start to happen to us. The air we breathe may be dirty. We don't eat well. Things happen to us. We make choices. We're a teenager. We decide we want to smoke or whatever, and then you take a brick away because you've lowered your voltage, and then something else happens, and you may make bad choices, and you take a brick away. When you have this huge, beautiful brick wall, by the time you're 60, 70, 80 years old, the wall's not so beautiful anymore because
Mhm.
you've added all these bad things that life gave you: stress, no sleeping, bad diet, that sort of thing. But what you don't know is that the storm's coming. And when the storm comes, it could flood you because there's no brick wall or very little of a brick wall left. So, really, our job is to look at the pattern and say, it's up to me to raise that voltage. We have a device and protocols that will help you insert voltage, but you also need to know you need to hold voltage. You need to do what you can, because you can't say there's not a pill. You got to do what you can to make wise choices, pick the things that will give you voltage. So, people think, well, I can have, a pop or a soda, or I can have water, or a nice cup of hot tea. You know, that's going to be, equally pleasurable to me, but it's going to give me voltage where the pop or the soda will not. So when they start to think like that, they start to choose things, that help help their voltage. And that also goes to thought. Thought and emotions can also steal from you. It's a negative. It changes your brain, your physiology. So people need to look at their thoughts and their emotions and how things affect them. Love and caring and friendship and hugs, taking a walk. Your dog or your cat will actually donate to you. Um, you'll notice when you're not, yeah, when you're not feeling well, you'll notice that your puppy or your cat wants to snuggle.
Mm.
So they've gone outside, picked up some good voltage and brought it in. They give it to you.
Hmm.
So, and they know, a mom will notice when, a child is not feeling well. And what'll she do? She'll say, "Come here, baby." Then after the baby starts to feel well and the fever breaks or whatever and goes to sleep, then the mom is worn out. She gave her voltage. Now she needs to go do something for herself to charge up, take a nap, take a walk,
Hmm.
do something to recharge. It's just a transfer. It's a transfer of the energy. The voltage goes from, high to low. It's going to try to balance itself out.
So would you say that really the voltage is the underlying causality for health or disease? That this is basically the root of it?
We've found that. Yeah, we found that. That it is that when you start to look and you find the cause, it's that the voltage is low.
So
And then yes, yeah, you find out what caused it and what you can do to stop it and how do you get the voltage back up. Some things we notice is dental has a huge, implication in health. And people don't think about that. They have a crown that's, infected underneath. That infection is a stealer. It doesn't function well with voltage. It doesn't hold a voltage. It doesn't transfer voltage. So each tooth is a meridian. So you can go through and get a dental chart, and it'll tell you heart, lung, spleen, gallbladder in your teeth. And a lot of times when you go in, you start to look and you say, oh, like the lady with the liver, I don't remember the whole story, but it could be that she had a root canal in her liver meridian tooth. Another thing, besides the accident, it could be that something else came in and there's something else bringing the liver down. Well, again, you look for the patterns of things that are disrupting. And then you try to fix what's disrupting, because that's stealing. If it's, a crown that is not functioning well, what do? Do you get the tooth pulled, or do you replace the crown, or, what do you do to get that fixed? So it's easier to keep the voltage in that area.
So from what I understand, it's like our body, we are really energetical a being, yeah, and everything is interrelated, and it's not so simple just because I have pain here, I'm taking a medicine or something, but it's really about understanding that there's so many factors influencing it, and from like also what I understand, that my diet, my lifestyle, my environment, my thoughts, my emotions, they all have an influence and can impact the voltage I maintain in my body, cells, or organs. And
yes. And it really is, when you look at, the word holistic, in the States, it's spelled with an H. It actually almost should be WH. It should be holistic, the whole person. It's what do you eat? What do you do? What environment you in, emotionally, physically? You really have to look at the whole person. It's not just a urine test or a blood test, or, now if you get injured, we can treat pain because you say, I slammed my thumb with a hammer. That we can deal with. But if you say there is a pain in this thumb and I have no reason, a typical doctor may say, well, let's just take a pain pill or do nothing or take an aspirin. What caused the pain?
So
then you start asking questions. Yeah.
From what I understand, there's always a cause for something. Nothing is random.
It's not random. No. And I think about my car, I say, well, there's this weird tick, and of course, the mechanic's going to go, well, let's figure out what that is, because something could get ready to go wrong. Of course it is. That's an engine. Well, we're an engine. The doctor, or we, should look at us. It's not just a random thing. There's a weird tick going on. No, there's something going on.
It doesn't make sense to say that if I have a disease, if I have pain, whatever, it's caused by low voltage, which itself is caused by other factors. So it's really about being a detective and discovering the multidimensional situation in a way. And and so, like, if I have a disease, or one of your clients, or what kind of people are coming through you? Is it someone with a cold? Is it someone with a terminal illness? Like, who are you speaking to? Who?
Sure. When we first started, it tended to be people like my dad that they said, something's not right here. They say, I'm crazy, or I'm depressed, and I don't have what I have, or there's nothing else I can do, or, here's what I'm taking. And there's all these pills. And they're like, something doesn't seem right to me. It's really the first time that they came up and said, I'm not willing just to die, or to keep taking these things. Something doesn't make sense for my body. So those people were coming, and they were like stage 3, stage 4 of something. They were at the end of whatever they were dealing with. They were sick and older, usually, and had nothing. Even sometimes their doctor said, there's nothing else I can do. I don't know. There's nothing else I can do. There's too much. That was what we started with. So we had lots of wheelchairs and walkers, and, people on, different various types of aid getting here. Um, but it started to change as more and more people are thinking holistically and buying, organic, non-GMO foods, and wanting to have local food brought in. They're starting to change and starting to say, no, I need to have more to do with my health. So now what we're noticing is people are getting younger because they say something's not right. And when I go to my doctor and I say, should I be on a special diet? They're like, no, it's okay. You get everything you need from your food.
Mhm.
No, something doesn't seem right. They didn't even ask me what I eat. I only eat at fast food restaurants. So I don't get everything. They know, and they say he didn't ask or she didn't ask, you know, but something to me tells me I eat junk, or my life is junk. I drink too much, I smoke too much, I don't sleep at all, I don't exercise. Then they start telling you what's wrong. Is like, why did nobody ask me? What about my life? So they're getting younger, and they're finding out, take care of self. And that's one thing that we always said is take care of the caregiver, or care for the caregiver. We found mom would get sick and all the kids would take turns taking care of mom. They would come in with mom and would say, so how are you? And they'd say, oh, I'm fine, so I'm worried about mom. It's like, yeah, we're going to talk to mom, but why don't you have therapy with us also? Oh, not me, I'm fine. You see, well, how are you sleeping? Not real well. You start looking at it, it's like, when they tell you on the airplane, you know think about yourself first. The oxygen mask falls, put it on yourself, then put it on your child, because if you die, the child can't, so you both die. And so we shifted a little bit in our clinic about take care of yourself and take care of the ailing member of the family, because you have to be well also. And so again, then they start to think, because then they go home and they start talking to their kids and they say, hey, let's make better choices. It's a pass down. Now they're taking care of somebody else again. And then they notice, because they come back a year later and they said, hey, I caught my son or daughter telling their friends, say, let's don't have cookies. Why don't we go in the garden and get a couple of carrots and we'll cut those? And let's talk about how we planted those with my grandpa. And you start to see it coming up, and the other kid says, wow, we've never had fresh veggies or fruit. But you're starting to see the difference in the younger coming back around what we all know we should do. We just don't.
And what I'm curious, so can you measure your voltage? Can you discover discrepancy to optimal voltage before any disease manifests?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. We actually have a machine here. It's called the MEAD, and it's a Meridian Energy Analysis device. And you test multiple points on the body, and it basically is a voltage meter. And it goes in, and you see a graph, and it shows you what should be normal for the heart, lung, spleen, gallbladder, those sort of things. And you can see it, and you can see where you are. You can also test and look at those things. It averages those things and takes an overall body voltage. And you can see where you're functioning in your normal daily life for the whole thing. If your total body voltage is down, you can be overstimulating with, say, coffee, caffeine, those sort of things, pure willpower, and functioning through life. And people think, well, gosh, you're very vibrant. What they don't know is when you don't see them, they're scraping bottom. They're tired. They're not thinking. They're, functioning at a level where they have you fooled that they're healthy. And when you actually ask them, they say, no, I'm really not. And a lot of them don't really notice it because they even have their self fooled. They come in and they go, well, I'm not really feeling well. I think I want to just stay healthy. They come in, you look at their overall body voltage, and it should be, minus 25. And you look at it and say, you're 5. They go, wow, that makes sense, because I really feel like crap. Well, now the real story comes out because they have a number. So now it's like the kimono is dropped. They're standing there naked and they're going, so you really feel well? Yeah, not really.
So it discovers a bit your own cognitive biases, no? Like, oh, well,
Yes.
yeah, it's normal. I've always been like that. This is normal for me, but you have no clue that your normal is probably very much
Oh,
distorted from
yes, yes.
the
Because then they look
self-interest.
back and they say, wow, I wasn't like this when I was 30.
Hmm.
Now I'm 50 and I feel like crap. Because now they look at it and say, you're 5, you should be 25. And they say, well, that's why I slept better when I was 20. I had less stress. I was still living at mom's house and she fed me well because I was going to college. You start putting it together and they go, ah,
Hmm.
now they know a lot of what they should do or shouldn't do because it starts to come up. You don't have to do a lot of teaching when it comes up and goes, yeah, this is what I do wrong. This, and this.
So it seems to me it's almost a psychotherapeutic device. It tells you the truth about your state,
Yeah.
and then you
Yes.
you cannot pretend or maybe hide or just.
It's hard to hide. It's hard to hide. And the device that they buy to take home actually has an assess mode in it. And we tell people, don't get caught up in the numbers. But a lot of people are type A people and they want to measure everything. And they want to go, what's my heart today? What's my spleen today? What's my gallbladder today? You know, you know, you can get a little tied up in the numbers.
And one thing I'm curious. So, if you say you can measure that or you're measuring that, like let's say I'm at optimum and then I have really a fight or I'm really stressed. How much can that differentiate from optimum just by maybe being exposed to a high stress environment? Is that just a slight difference or can it have dramatic impacts?
It can change you dramatic. One of the things we do with a device is we teach people how to reset their autonomic nervous system. It's under study with the U.S. Military at a couple of
Oh,
places.
uh-huh.
And it's amazing when you look at it because we can reset somebody and they'll go from stress, confused. You reset them by treating on the vagus nerve, and you'll notice that all of a sudden they get to very clear but relaxed. And it's once you do that, they say, wow, my breathing changed. It's no longer shallow. My heart rate came down. My thinking got clear. Because really, PTSD or, fight or flight, basically, if you're in fight or flight, you're either, going to fight or you're going to run to get away from a saber-toothed tiger or somebody that's trying to attack you.
Or freeze, yeah.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So when you look at that's not a good place. And a lot of us live that way, because we're in our business and we're thinking and there's, our phones and our texts and our emails, and then there's a call, and then, we have to, run quick, get lunch, and then pick up the kids from school and back to the work, and not healthy, not healthy. So we've noticed that, a lot of our people will get up in the morning and we call it charging. They'll go in and they'll reset their autonomic nervous system. They'll, charge their body with hand plates and foot plates.
So it is a tool which measures your system, but then also it charges your system.
Charges. Yes. Yes. So it's basically like putting your electric car on the charger in the morning, but you're doing it for yourself. You're getting your body up to optimal. You're resetting your autonomic nervous system. You get up, you're ready, and you're ready to go at a great place. Almost a meditative state where you're calm, but you're thinking well. There's no fight or flight. You're in a good space. You go about work. And then let's say that you have to do a meeting in front of 1,000 people. And then you're backstage and your heart starts to pump and you start to get a little shallow and you're like, what am I going to say? Is it going to be well? You get to that point. They'll reset their autonomic nervous system back down. They're ready to go. They introduce them. They're ready to go from that space, from a clear, comfortable, meditative, nice place. Yeah. And I almost say it's like, when they tell you, when you're little and you're learning how to speak in front of people and they say it's okay to take a pause and think. It's almost what this does. Reset your autonomic system. It's a pause.
Out of curiosity, do you have some of those devices just, I don't know, to
I
show or hold into the camera or so? We'd
do.
love to see how it
So
looks.
that is
Ah,
the biomodulator.
yeah.
You can treat with it directly with the device. That's where you can actually put it here.
That's how you're
Or if
charging yourself. Huh?
Mhm.
Mhm,
And you just put it here and hold it for 2 minutes when it's on the frequency set.
mhm.
Move it to the other side. This can also treat pain really easily. You just treat the pain wherever you hurt. You just treat it directly on the space wherever the pain is.
And this is also indicating your voltage.
Yes, yes.
Hmm.
Basically, there's a positive and minus here.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
So when you actually put it in assess, you can actually go to a place. Say my thumb hurt, I could actually take it and test here,
Yeah.
look at the number, and it would say 5 or 7 or 50.
Okay.
50 is charging. Ah, so I heard it. It's actually trying to call in everything I
Mhm,
need.
mhm, mhm.
It's a 5. It should be 25 or more. It's pain. So I'm just going to put the frequency on and I'm just going to treat my thumb.
And then basically afterwards you can measure again, and then you would see a difference in voltage. Huh?
Yeah,
And,
yeah,
and
yeah. And what happens is when it reaches minus 25, that's normally when they start to notice, oh, I can move my thumb. There's not pain here because it equalized.
hmm.
And then the pain starts to go. And then it starts to say, oh, I need white blood cells, red blood cells. I need to move that in, heal what it is. It's a sprain or whatever.
And is that something like you your body can learn from, so that at some point, I don't know, you don't need to apply the instrument anymore? Or is that something which only works if you use it, you get the effect, and then you have to use it again? And or is that something your body kind of can model or so? Or
It's both. It's both.
both?
If it was an injury, that's especially easy because the injury is
Mhm,
going to
mhm,
heal.
mhm, mhm,
Once you get to healing, then it starts to say, oh, this
mhm.
is where I need to function. It goes back to normal. If you have something stealing from it, say an injury or a tooth, or you continue to injure it, um, or if it's just not functioning well, you know, then that's where you go back and you say, we can put the voltage in, get it to where it needs to be. Like the lady with the liver, we know she's going to have to raise that voltage every day because it's damaged. It's never going to function well. We got to keep it charged to the best it can for it to function the best it can. It's not going to heal it more than likely because it was damaged. So, um, so it's a yes and a no.
Mhm,
She
mhm.
knows she has to do that every day. So she resets her autonomic nervous system every day. She charges her whole body, and then she charges just the organ, the liver, that has the problem. And she's an actress, so she has it, with her in her, her trailer or backstage, and she does these things before she goes on set, and she can go on set, no pain, and she resets herself. It lets her get in character. She's ready because now she's in control. She's in a good space. She can find her character and say, I need to act like this person that I'm portraying today. And so she can now set her mind without the stress. And so she says she finds that it helps her with her character better, easier, faster, because she's in control and there's no stress. What if they don't like me? What if I don't get the award? That sort of thing.
Hmm.
So, and we hear that from everybody, not just actresses, just normal people.
Mhm.
They say, my back hurts me so bad that I almost can't function. Well, if we can get the pain under control, they're a lot better. you know,
So I have a small testimony to make. I have not good back pain for a while, and I have been trying so many things, and I still have it. So
yeah.
I'm just personally, I'm not sure if it's physical, if it's psychological. Is it where does it come from? If there's something to do about, or is it just about accepting and living with it? So I'm that rang a bell when you just said back pain. Yeah.
Sure, sure, sure.
So
And what I may do is I may get you with, later, get you personally with one of our doctors here, because a lot we can do telemedicine, just by
mhm.
asking question, what do you do? When do you notice it? What time? What's going on? We can find out if we can tell by just talking to you what's going on. Because sometimes, literally I sit a lot, so I get back pain because I sit a lot. And so I have to stop and reset things, treat my back, and then I'm ready.
Mm.
And it's forced because I'm here with 2 to 3 screens and I'm talking to people and doing things. So I know I create that.
Mm.
That's my stealer. I don't
Mm.
get up. I don't stretch during the day. I'm here for 9 hours at my desk.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So I know I do those things. But then I know, which is a good, bad thing, I have the device I can treat myself.
Mm.
But I do know on the weekends, I go for a walk. I go to my trainer. I do stretching. I do yoga. To try to fix the damage I inflicted on myself and stole my own voltage because
Mm.
I have to work 9 hours a day tied to a desk.
So it's basically it's a tool or it's a modality which helps you negate some of the probably not so healthy influences we are exposed in our society to. Just like
Yes,
and
yes, yes.
and like when we go back to clients coming to you, is that similar to what you're doing with them? That like you help them understand what causes the low voltage, and then you're also kickstarting their voltage somehow.
Yes,
And
yes, yes,
Mhm.
yes. And it's really interesting because again, it's like peeling an onion.
Mm.
You start and in holistic medicine, you actually have learned that what you treat today, you actually go backwards because something else may show up. That's you peeled the onion, something before showed up.
Mm.
So if
Mhm.
they're really sick, those really sick people, we would do that. They'd say, I came in for this, and we start peeling the onion. Well, that went away. Oh, well, this showed up. Then you peel that away and you start working on that, and then this showed up. You know, and what happens is if it's injuries or problems, they showed up backwards the way they started. So the last one you get to is the first one you got.
Mm. Mhm. Uh,
So yeah,
and
so the liver actually for our friend when she was injured at 7,
Mhm.
you see, we started peeling the most recent
Mm.
problem she had. And then the more she used it, the closer she got back to when the liver was actually injured.
So what I'm hypothesizing here is also that what you're doing is really empowering people because they might like correct me if I'm wrong, but the more I understand how I like what is going on or how am I positively contributing to my situation, the more I can take charge or change something, and I'm not just left to coincidences or random pain or disease, and I have no clue what it is about, and have a doctor prescribing me something, and um,
Yeah, yeah,
basically I'm dependent on someone else's like judgment or opinion or
yes, yes.
advice.
And when you are interactive with your own health, you actually have a lot of the answers. Yeah.
Mhm.
So and that's the thing is, we want people to, if you need a good surgeon, you need a great surgeon. We tell people that all the time. But a lot of times the doctors have you see their technician first. It's like say, we'll take your temperature, we'll look in your ear, let me listen to your heart. Do you have any problems to tell me today? I have your urine test. Thank you very much. We'll see you in a year. They never said, how are you?
Mhm.
You know, and that's the piece. You have to be interaction. How are you? You're the one that writes the owner's manual to yourself. you know, Here's what I've noticed. Here's the patterns. Here's what's happening. I don't know why this shoulder hurts always. Then the logical question for the doctor, then, if you brought it up, would be, did you injure it or did it show up for no reason? But see, you have to be in the driver's seat because, let me check your temperature. How's your heart rate? They may never find that they didn't notice you weren't using this arm and you were protecting it. That you never said, this shoulder hurts all the time. It's other things, and that's when people come here, even if we do the telemedicine, is that it's important to listen, watch, see what's going on, and listen to what they tell you too. A lot of times they tell you that you're meeting them in the waiting room and they say, gosh, how have you made it through the last year during the quarantines? Well, it's been really stressful. I lost my job. All of those things start to come out and you're like, okay, patterns, stress.
Mhm.
And the minute you say stress, they go, wow, yes, more stress than I've ever had in my life. Big clue, you know, but it's functioning with the person. it's like bring more of that. What's going on?
So you could almost say that you are training or offering training in self-awareness.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's amazing. Be perceptive of yourself, and teach your kids, treat your spouse, treat other people. Because you'll start to see the patterns. You'll
Hmm.
start to see the patterns in yourself and other. Because you'll ask people, like if we were working a lot together, I would say, hey, I noticed that you're always trying to pop your back. And
Mhm.
you may not have noticed it yet, and you go, wow, yeah, my back hurts a lot all the time. Wow, do you sit a lot? Do you ever get up and exercise? Do you get up and move around? You see, it's looking for those patterns and being perceptive.
So it's almost that the body or we as a human being kind of signaling what is going on with us. So like we only need to pay attention, and we most probably are not really trained in doing it. But
Yeah.
but I get also that if we were about understanding the signals of our bodies, we would know at any time what is going on.
Yes, yes. And that's where, we get a lot of people that, when they come in and we just break it down, it seems different because we're asking different questions.
Hmm.
And then when you hit on it, like the liver, she's like, nobody's ever told me that.
Hmm.
But it's quite obvious that's what it is.
Hmm.
Once you hit on the real thing, you're like, there we go. Okay, now what do we do? You know, and she still does what she needs to do with her other things. She has other things going on, and she does those things. The proper diet that she needs to be on, everything else. She still does what she needs. She just added this. You subtract what doesn't work for you anymore, and you add things that do.
And like, I mean, we said in the beginning, and also from what I get, you seem to be extremely passionate about empowering people, literally. And what would you say, or would you say, I don't know, is your approach to health, well-being, is it easier than what conventional medicine is doing, like to approach people and like to help them, or is it more challenging because it's very different to possibly what people are used to?
Mhm. A very interesting question. I've noticed that it's become easier. And
Hmm.
I think it's just that people have now gotten used to, they don't see the doctors like they used to. When I was a kid, you'd go in and you knew the doctor, you knew the staff. They say, hey, I saw you fell off your bike last week. Let me look at your knee. Because he lives on our street.
Mhm, mhm.
But then when they notice they see the doctor for 6 minutes, they know something's not right. Plus, they're learning about their health. They're learning about, exercise and, clean water and things. So I think it's getting easier that they're becoming interactive and people now have access to things. So a lot of my traditional doctor friends, and I have some that, are completely traditional Western medicine. And we're able to share because, if you need a medical doctor to help you, you need a great medical doctor. And there's things like, diabetes or all those things. You need that follow up to know you need to take your insulin, you need to do this for your diabetes. Um, but be interactive. We can find something sometimes they can't find just by looking just a little different. But these traditional doctors are coming in and they're saying, I started to give this to my patient. My patient said, I'm not taking that. They'll say, well, you have to. I don't have to do anything. But the side effects of that are, and he said, and the patient will actually list the side effects. Is that, wow? I have to go back and look them up because they've done their research. You know, and what's interesting is when you go back and look at some of those side effects, sometimes even the answer's in the side effect. They've been taking it and it says, oh, these three things can happen. So it's nice because you're interacting with your doctors of all genres and you start to learn how and where to go for the right answer. So the patients are becoming more informed and working with their doctors of all genres of what they need. And then they know who to go to when they need to go to that person. So, yeah, I think it's easier. And people are understanding, acupuncture, uh, things like, yoga and why that works. Why do you feel better? Why does stretching your muscles and becoming flexible, why does that work for you? They're putting together because there's information out there to learn it. And so it's becoming easier, and they are on their own starting to realize I need to be interactive with my health. I control me. I control my health. And when they go to any doctor, they're able to say, here's what I've noticed, instead of waiting for the doctor to ask them. I notice this shoulder hurts all the time, and there's no reason I did not injure it.
So, would you say the answer to optimizing, improving the current healthcare or sick care system is even through the patient
Yeah.
themselves, that they become more aware and take power and control over their circumstances? And so it's kind of not inverse the system in itself changes, but it's through the patients.
Yes. Yes.
Hmm,
And I know
interesting.
that, yeah, when we were doing, cataract surgery, 14, 15 years old, I was just viewing and watching.
Hmm.
And it was interesting because, my dad would say, listen and watch the customer very close. You can learn so much. You can learn so much because what if you went to somebody and said, so, how's your eyesight? And they go, it's fine. Okay. Well, is fine good as of today or when you were 20? Well, when I was 20, I could see everything and I didn't have this crazy night glare. Ah, night glare. You have night glare. You write that down. Yeah. How about daytime? Do you have dazzle when you go outside after leaving a building? Go outside. Oh, yes. For about 3 minutes, I have to just stand there and get my glasses and wait. Dazzle is amazing. Okay. But see, they just told you their eyesight's fine. You have two really good things. So now when you go do their eye exam, you say, wow, you can't see better than 20/40. Oh, okay. What happened was they were getting the beginnings of cataracts. The cataracts make night vision worse. Day vision, when you go outside, it's like a dazzle because it's a little bit of a frosted lens in their eye. So you watched them very close. You could see how they walked, what they could see, what they can't see, if they tripped on something when they saw that the floor changed into carpet,
Hmm.
and that was just on eyes, but you paid attention because then you could ask them the question. So we're trying to teach people, ask the question.
Hmm. Mhm, mhm.
Ask the question, and when you go, wow, every time I go outside, I can't see very well for about 3 minutes. That's important. There's a reason why it didn't happen 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. There's something, you know, and that's what they're waking up to. That's really the holistic medicine, the whole body. There's something there. You're the controller of you.
Wow, that's very, very powerful, and it makes a lot of sense. And basically it's also like what I'm at least intending with this podcast. It's like it seems that you're leading people, your customers, persons, through asking questions, yeah, to see outside their perception, their perspective on life, and
Outside. Yes, yes. And
wow.
that's what's really interesting. And that's where, now we're seeing people come to our training classes of all genres because every single person's being exposed.
So
So
I,
they're outside their box. Yeah.
I'm curious when you say training classes. That sounds very different to we have a therapy session here, or we are like you're really training people to ask questions, or to like how can I imagine that? That sounds so interesting.
Sure, sure. So training's a little misleading because
Mhm,
people think training, they learn how to push these buttons.
mhm,
I can teach you how to push these buttons in about 3 minutes.
mhm,
So when they come, it's really breaking it down. We break down why good water that's clean and has the minerals in it that you need, why, and
mhm,
what's in some of the water that you need taken out, and why it's recycled and all of those things, how, chlorine in the water, whatever. So they learn why that little piece in hydration, why that's important. Food and supplementation, we break that down. Why non-GMO? Why local food? So we break it down. So it's really more of a health conference.
Mhm.
So there are, everybody that comes to that is somebody who owns one of these. So that's how they, get in. So they have that commonality. But then we break it down because it's like, look at the things. If you look at your life as a wheel, there's a spoke, which is you and all the things that control you. Food, water, those things. You look back at those things and how that affects you. If you have, 10 spokes and 4 are broken, you're not going to go very well, very fast,
Mhm.
very long. The wheel's going to go. So it's break it down, find out what's going on, learn to ask the questions. And that's what's fun is we have people that come in that, we're thinking very holistically, and they may think very Western medicine, or they may be an acupuncturist, or they may be a dentist. Then we can go and it's an open discussion with people who are just home users, speaking a lot like we are, about when this happens, that causes this syndrome in the body. And then we're able to talk about, well, if the voltage is low, then this happens. And then it's, you're talking together with 2 scientists, with other people in the room. So they bring it down to where we can understand it. And they're going, oh, this makes perfect sense. This works with that. Ask the question, have the information, and treat the whole body. You see, it's pulling people together as they all move, I think, forward, because we, the consumers, are asking for treat my whole body. So we're forcing a change, I think, in the world of the sick care. Wait till they're sick and treat the symptom. Things are being forced, I think, into a way of saying, no, we need to think about the whole body. The countries that have good wellness care have less people that are sick later with multiple things. Their death rates are going higher. The US is going, the death rate is going higher in the US because we're waiting until they're sick. Other countries are saying, no, exercise. Let me tell you about exercise. Do this, drink good, eat well, think well. These things are more integrative. And their costs are actually going down in healthcare, and the people are staying well longer.
Hmm.
And that's coming over here, and we're getting people to talk. Because we, the customers, are saying, doctor, what about supplementation? You no longer can say you get things from your food. That's not true. In most cases, it's not true.
Mhm.
Most people eat junk because they're working too much and they do something that's fast. And you can't do that 3 meals a day for your whole life. Can't do it.
Well, like, have you heard of the trivium? It has been thought in trivium. It's a method of true discovery of truth. It was taught in ancient times, and what you're sharing here is exactly what the trivium is. The first thing is information. You need good information, yeah. But if you just have the information, like it will not lead to any better actions, because you also need to understand it. And when you said we teach them why it is important, that's really the second step, to create an understanding of it, to then take action, which is the third step, basically. And only if you take action, if you integrate it, if you apply it, your reality changes. So when I listened to you, that was so amazing, because and that's my opinion, that's really scarce. Most of what we have been taught is information, and most of it is not even right information, but how to do it, and how to understand it, and how to apply it. It's really not something which is very common. So I was like, wow, this is so cool what you're doing.
Yes, yes. It's really true. And, we had one of our health conferences this weekend. And it was fun because I went to dinner with one of the participants. And, he and the wife looked and they said, being healthy really isn't that hard. We just broke it down. Just think. Take everything, break it down like what you said. Let's give you some information, understand it, and change. You know, and they were literally looking at it and they said, we can still enjoy our life just by changing things and finding things that make us just as happy with our choices. Change our intake, And a lot of that too is not only food and water, but thought intake. Um, what you think, what you do, how you act, how you treat others, how people treat you, all those things. They said it's really not that hard. And that
Mm.
was nice to hear, kind of like what you just said. It was nice to hear that, like, it's really not that hard. I had one lady one time, she told me, she said, she said, after being here, she said, I figured out it took me a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of action to get myself this sick. I was like, wow, to get yourself this sick. And she said, yes. She said, it's going to take me doing everything I've learned and doing the right things and to continue my path to get myself well. And that's care for the caregiver, which is take care of yourself. Take care of yourself. And she said, think about it. She said, I grew up in the 60s and 70s. She said, I was a hippie. And it's a wonder I wasn't dead a couple to three times in my life from things I did. She said, if you look at all the things you think about a hippie, that was me. And then the 80s came, and then that party scene, and that was me. Then the 90s, and I'm older, don't do anything and eat crap. That was me. And now I have me. And I was like, wow, amazing. And she said, what am I going to do? I have to change. And that was such a breakthrough. You could see her as she was telling me that some of the layers of her life were coming off. And it was nice because, what the guy said, she didn't say it, but it was like, it doesn't have to be that hard. She's like, I just make different choices. What I intake, what I do for me is what's going to get me through all of this.
Yeah, it makes, yeah, it resonates so much with me, and that's also my personal discovery, that, and I call it the truth about health, the truth about us. It's actually very simple. The only thing is, it's not something we're exposed to a lot in our society. So we grow up in a state of confusion, yeah, like being very disempowered and dependent on others, making sense for us, yeah, authorities or so. and
Sure.
and then everything seems so difficult, and from this perception,
Yeah.
health is something scarce
Yeah.
and difficult and tricky to think, and we have to fight all those diseases which are normal because it's a human experience. But once you jump out of this paradigm, and it is actually very simple. It's
Sure.
Yeah, and it's just tricky to get there, yeah, to fight your way out of this confusion, in a sense, yeah. I don't
Yes.
know if
Yes.
that makes sense or resonates. That's
It
a bit
does.
my picture I have, yeah.
Yes. Yes. And that's what everybody tells us. They said it feels like a fight
Hmm.
to get here where I ask the questions. Well, the system's not set up for you to ask any questions. You know, just healthcare in itself, is I'm here to treat you. Well, the minute I get you to help talk to me, I can do my job a lot better. It's the diagnostics of finding what's really wrong. Yeah. And that makes a difference. And it all goes back to you and the whole care of yourself, the holistic.
And I'm curious to hear your perspective on that. It seems also that the incentivization is not really well thought through in our current sick care or healthcare system. And just yesterday, I found this quote. I believe it's a German philosopher or so. He said, and it's a rhyme in German. In English, it will not rhyme. What takes away the daily breath of the doctor? It's health or it's death. So that's why the doctor, to survive, keeps us in between health and death. Yeah.
Sure.
Mm.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
I found that
Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
resonated quite a bit. Mm.
Yeah. It's amazing. Amazing. Yeah.
Mm.
And I think the whole thing is happening, and especially with, vaccine, get a vaccine, don't get a vaccine. I actually think it's actually a good time because it's a good conversation. What are you taking into your body? And what do you let into your body?
Hmm.
You know, yeah, it's controversial, but I think controversy sometimes is a good thing. It gets us talking, you know.
It,
Um,
it,
you
it
know,
forces you also to take a stand, no? Like
yeah,
to
yeah,
think
yeah.
something
And then
through.
I think, yeah, and I think too, being willing to say maybe I was wrong.
Mm.
Maybe I was wrong, you know. And that's why doctors, you know, say, hey, this is a practice. You know, this is my practice, my business. That practice, that means things can change. You can go, yeah, that was what I thought 10 years ago, but no, I'm gonna change my practice.
Hmm. Hmm.
You know, it's yeah, yeah, yeah. It's fun to play. I love playing with words. I love the word pattern, the patterns.
Yeah, it is so interesting, and I mean that's the first step of the trivium. It's called grammar. Also, the words we're using, and very often we're using words with a very different meaning than it actually has. So there's also some distortion with our language going on.
Yeah,
And one thing I like, I'm very appreciative of your time, and I know we're talking already for almost 1.5 hours. One thing though, I want to ask you, I'm curious. Um, I mean, you like when we just said, or when I just shared this little poem or so about maybe not so well incentivation of the others. Like, what do you think is like? Why are you approaching it different? Like, what was the reason or the cause that led you to have a different perspective on that? Like if that would be really and I mean, I know from own experience that it's difficult or can be difficult to have a different
sure.
opinion. No, for might
Yes,
be being criticized or judged or by the mainstream or so. And I'm curious, like, what's your foundation or why? Like, what led to you being so outside the box, if you want to call it.
sure, sure. You know, and that's really fun because you know I've looked at that a lot um, lately because you know we meet so many wonderful people and from all over the world, and they ask that question, and so it lets you become very introspective. And so one thing I noticed was that I never had any of my parents or my grandparents ever say you can't or I can't.
Wow.
So when somebody would say, I need to do this on either side, as far back in the family tree as I can notice, everybody always said, oh, let me work on that. Or let me see what I can do or who I can find. It was always possibility of looking forward. And not all of us were doctors. You know, there was, you know, people that were farmers and, you know, did other things in the past. But it was always like, oh, you need to fix that, whatever. Let me find somebody or let's see what we can do. So when I look at that basis of growing up that way and knowing that my parents always would say, you have a choice to make. I know you're four, but here's a choice to make, and here's the consequences. The good ones and the bad ones, you make a choice, and I'll stand behind your choice. I
Wow.
thought, wow, that's pretty good when you layer those two things on. Then when I noticed when I started working for my dad, I mean, it was just such intriguing to see people see and the adrenaline hit and just the love and getting hugs from these people and seeing them see again. And then 6 months later, they come back and said, it's spring. I saw the flowers, you know, and you again get that love hit. You know, it was just amazing because I heard my dad one time. Somebody said it must be wonderful to be able to heal all these people. He said, I feel I was sent here to do this. Then you look back at it and you go, wow, that's an interesting way to look at that, I think. I was sent here to do this. It's a gift and an honor to be able to do that. It takes a lot of the heat, I think, off of the humanness of having to be right. Because, then you could still say, I learned something. And this is what I've noticed. You see, a lot of the heat was off in my whole life. In that idea, in that verbiage of my dad saying, I think I can do this. And I was sent here to do this. This is what my gift is to help people. Then we can go from that place into the learning and the teaching of, we're just here to help. And also when you can ask someone else for the help, because there's nothing wrong with asking for help. I don't know something, so I'm going to reach out for somebody that does know it, or that can help think with me. And there's no judgment. It's only to help people and to learn something and to change. So yeah, I think a lot of those things was a lot of basis. And I really just kind of put that together in the last 6 or 8 months. Yeah, because I noticed one thing is, people said, well, you need to write a book. And I said, okay, let me think about that. That's kind of weird. I usually work in the background. So, I'm not usually this person that's this vocal or out. I do things in the back and let somebody else come up front. But I remember when I was little, somebody asked me, said, what do you want to do in the future? And I said, well, I just want to help people. And I want to do this and that. And I want to have my own company where I help people. I can make the decisions. And they said, well, yeah, that's probably not going to happen unless you know exactly what you're going to do and how you're going to get there. And I said, hey, why not me? And I said, because that's not the way it works. You got to say, I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be an engineer, and I'm going to do this and that and this and the other. They said, you come up with a goal that's not obtainable unless you have this path. Kept saying, I think I'll find a way, but why not me? Well, recently I looked at it and I said, wait a minute. Why not me typically has a question mark. Like I would be asking them, why not me? Like, well, they were telling me. I wasn't accepting it in the way I was taking the answer. I could say, no, I will make it happen. I will help people. And this is way before I worked with my dad. Oh, I'm going to find a way. What I figured out, it didn't have a question mark. It had an exclamation point. It was a statement. I was going to find a way to help people. And I think, really, if you look at it without getting too woo-woo, but I think that's almost like a prayer. I think I knew I was sent here to do something a lot like my dad. And I think that was almost basically saying, I'm ready. Truly. And I think that certainty allowed me to find things because, I'm okay with saying, hey, I didn't know that. I don't know that. I don't know how to do that. But I'll find somebody because I'm here to help people. And that's what we do every day in our clinic. And that's what we do every day with Senergy, about helping people raise their voltage, is we're here to help. And I notice when people come to the health conference, that when they come in, they said, somebody listened to me. Somebody listened to me. That's all everybody wants, is somebody to listen to them. It just happens to be attached to their health care because they say, people told me I was crazy. You're not sick. There's nothing wrong with you. Just take this pill, go home. No, somebody listened to me. I'm not crazy. No, your pain is something. And that's all they really wanted, was somebody to listen to them. And then it empowered them because finally somebody heard them say, I can do this. You see, it kind of goes back to that same thing that I always heard from my parents. I got this. I can do this. They said, if I just had some information, I could do this. So I think it all kind of goes around. It's just helping people and just listening and caring. And then they say, can I give you a hug? And that's kind of hard in a quarantine world when you have to stay 6 feet away from people. With a mask.
That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah. We're like, while you're over there, hey, I'll give you a hug. But it was very strange. But, and I think too, the quarantine actually gave us a little bit of a boost too, because I think by getting people away from each other, It gave people a chance to think. And I think I'm hearing a lot of this kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
You and I meeting, we had a very open discussion, about a possibility. And I think that is helping the world just talk and say, this is what I feel. This is what I've learned. This is who I want to learn from and share, and no judgment. I think a lot of that has come up. So I hope that answered your question. I went a little long on that.
No, it's first of all, thank you for sharing this. And there are, I mean, so many powerful lessons in what you just shared. One of the things I heard, I mean, I'm sure I will listen again. I will discover more. It's not so much about how you get somewhere, but it's about having a what, yet knowing where you want to go, having a final destination somehow. And that, yeah, that's something very, very powerful. Thank you very much. And the other thing I'm also getting is basically the programming we're receiving. Yeah, if like what you're sharing, like how your family approached opportunity, and that's totally beautiful. But then also from my own experience, and like it's not the default way of growing up. It's like it's rather like you shouldn't be do this, you can't do this. Like listen to the authority. I decide what you should be doing or so. So yeah, that's so nice and so important. Yeah, and you're just reconfirming that to me again. That's very, very nice. And from what like I'm also curious to hear a bit more about that, because you said something along the lines of I feel I'm sent here to help or to do something, and that might open up a broader perspective of like how do you see who you are, or how do if you're open to talk about this,
Sure.
um what is your bigger picture on life and being a human?
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. Recently I got to meet Dr. Bruce Lipton,
Oh,
and
okay. Hmm.
yeah, and it was very interesting because just going through all of these things, and we were at a conference, and I was able to walk out, and he was there, and he told us all about his, the book about the, biology of belief, and um, so I came up and I said, "Can I ask you a question?" And I said, "Out of all the things you've done, and even the things you told us today, it was a very private little small group.
Hmm. Hmm.
What is the most important thing you would think we'd need to take away if we can take away one thing?" He said, "Wow, I've never been asked that actual question." But, he said, "That's like really cooking stuff down." But he said, "Okay, I got it." And he said, people try to figure out, in one word when they say, "I am something." And, in the self help, kind of world, that's pretty good. You say, "I am powerful. I am smart. I am whatever." He said, when you realize truly what your "I am" statement is, you've really conquered what you were sent here by God to do. I said, "Wow, that's pretty amazing." And I said, "But that brings up another question or a statement. But God says he is I am." And he said, "Yes." And he turned and he walked away.
Hmm.
As myself and three other people were standing there, he got about 10 feet away as we watched him walk away, and he stopped and he turned back around and looked and he said, "Are you okay with that?" I said, "I think so." But I think it's amazing when you really break that back down, because it was a spiritual event actually that we were at, where you just
Hmm.
learn to question and ask and be with people of different thought, and just a lot of different things that came around. But it really looked at that I feel that I was sent here to do something, and that I agreed to do it, which was to help people in whatever manner. And so when you look at that, when you say, well, the "I am" is, he is all, or, God is all, but he's within us. which makes us one.
Mhm.
So when you look at we help the other, it becomes very simple because it's like if we're all one, it doesn't matter what the other person is or thinks or does. It becomes very easy to help with no judgment and expect really no return, actually. You just help. So, and that's really where I came from the philanthropy piece is, somebody needs help, period. No meaning. Yeah. And so it goes back to kind of the way we are here at our office. It's love and compassion. And, when we accept a new client, we have a chat that comes on and it's actually titled Health Delivered. It's not a new client. We delivered health to somebody.
Mhm.
It's just, to me, it's beautiful. It's,
Mhm.
everybody gets to leave the day and we get to leave and we actually say, wow, we really helped a lot of people today. And tomorrow we get to do it all over again. So it really took uh, the philanthropy into a different place. Every single day we get to help. And it's a joy and it's a gift. And it's a gift to meet these people and to exchange and, to love. Because what happens is they give back to us too. We learn from them. We get to meet them and we get to see. And they always give us another gift.
Mhm.
And it goes on. And then we meet their family and their friends. And it just keeps going. So it takes a lot of that heat off, like we talked about the heat. There's no stress here. We have pretty art in our office. We have pretty music that plays. We start the day with gratitude. Um, we end the day in gratitude. And you know, I think it all goes back to the way I grew up. It's just being gratitude and just do what you were sent here to do. And it's just nice.
It's beautiful. Thank you again for sharing this. And yeah, it's something I am discovering or I have been discovering, let's say, over the last year, that basically my whole life was about optimizing life for myself, yeah, and maybe myself and achieving stuff. But now I'm about to turn that focus more about what can I contribute, or what can I, how can I help, basically. And
Sure.
like it's taking
Yes.
the focus away from oneself, and
Yes.
it's also relieving. Yeah, it takes some pressure away, and also it personally, it's my journey. It it is leading to more fulfillment.
Sure.
Yeah, and
Sure.
yeah, thank you very much for yeah, sharing this wisdom with us. And you touched on philanthropy, and I know that that's something very dear to your heart. Do you want to share a little bit about what that is about, what you're doing, and what is important to you?
Sure. Sure. So working with eyes all that long time ago really kind of gave me, it's still in my heart. I grew up that way. So I was approached by the American Foundation for the Blind, which is 100 years old this year, 2021. And they said, we would like to make a documentary about Helen Keller and the way she changed the world. And I said, wow, that's really interesting. I think I'd like to help. So I was the sole funder to make the basically the trailer or the splash video to help get money donated to make this documentary. So I got to work with the writers. So when we first came on, it's like, let's just talk about what we really want to do. And what was interesting is, Helen Keller being a deaf blind person, and all we really all know is the movie The Miracle Worker, where she saw water or felt water. And then, her teacher spelled water in her hand. And she said, oh, That is water. This means something. And then a whole new world opened. That's all we really know. But we all know she's fabulous, but why? We didn't know.
Hmm.
So we decided we wanted to bring that person and say, this is what she did for the modern world. It gave us a way of thought and a way of just saying her name. People say, I think I'm inspired to do something beyond myself and my quote disabilities, whatever that may be, because of what she did with being deafblind. But we don't know everything she did do and why and how that affects us today and in the future about us opening our thought, really. So we're right in the depths of that. And, we're working with donors to try to get the money. But our idea is that it will be on, say, a Netflix International where we can actually have people watch it and learn about a person that did things, what it is and how it works, and people who have taken that now and possibly moved that into the future. By saying there are no limits. There are no limits. And so that's what we're working on now is Helen Keller in a modern age. And we'll see what it goes. It's, by American Foundation for the Blind, because she helped start it. But it's actually about the person and about humanity and teaching kids on how to think outside the box. Comes right along with what I do. I mean, it really rode right into what I like to do. About sometimes maybe, the vision of the future isn't necessarily what you see. There's lots of ways you can turn this. It's like, wow, you can be so much more than your physicalness. And you just have to get over that and move forward. And here's a great example. So, as we start to do this, we're seeing that it's way bigger than us. It's way bigger than anything, but it's going to bring the world to think about what about blind people? What about people who are deaf? What about people who have other things going on with them? Where do they go when they need help? How do we help them? Do they need help? Because you know what? Some of the strongest people I know are blind or deaf or have cerebral palsy. And you look at the tenacity that this person has in their life, and it teaches you something. They don't, quote, need help. They're very strong. They just may not have the resources. So, it runs really close to my heart because it's so important. Because, I look for diversity because I learn from it. And I think this way we can look at it and go, hey, there's people over here that you may not know that can do a lot of things. And the bad thing is a lot of deaf blind people or deaf people or people with different disabilities aren't working in the world. Why? We don't know. But when you look at what they can do, I know a blind person or, it takes them a lot longer to get somewhere than me. Just because they can't get in the car and go. But you learn from that and like, wow, wouldn't I want that person working for me? Because if they can figure that out every day, they're going to be able to see something in my business that I cannot see. Because they're going to figure it out. Because that goes back to, I can do this. So that's what I'm working on now, along with everything else.
Wow, yeah. Thank you for sharing. I would love to share information with the show notes. If you provide any links or information, I will happily add that so that people can learn more about it. And you said you're open for donations too.
Yes,
So
I will get that to you. Yes, because it's going to be a beautiful thing.
one thing I just got from what you shared, and that so I had a conversation with a lady who was an asylum seeker for 4 years, and she shared her journey, and she said, like, yeah, people offer help, but like I don't want like what people think I need. Yeah, it's very different, and like I like, and she was rejecting it somehow because she said, like, I want people having a conversation with me and ask me what I need. Yeah, if at all. So that conversation changed my perspective quite a bit. Yeah, because I never thought that through. Like I also like, yeah, I want to help, but it was what I wanted to help to give. It was not really what do you need. And when you shared that right now, it was also, yeah, giving a new perspective that they don't,
Yeah,
like, possibly don't need what I think they need. Yeah, or maybe from
yeah,
a perspective they're disabled or so. Yeah, and they need me to go through life. So yeah,
yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah, yeah. You know, I've had multiple times, you know, being with people that have, you know, quote, a disability. And I hate that word because it's really different abilities. It's just different. But, you know, when you look at and you learn what they actually do, it really gives you a different place, you know, and then it becomes a very beautiful thing because as you're, you know, walking along and trying to get through, you know, a crowd or whatever, it just becomes a piece, you know. uh, you know, there's a step in 3 feet, you know, as you're walking along and talking, you know, and then, you know, it's just a piece of moving, you know, because then that person's going to tell you and say, here's what you don't sense. It's going to rain and we have no umbrellas. Wow. Hold on. You know,
what I'm
you know,
just
it's different. Yes.
what I'm just thinking. I mean, we have our five senses and the sixth sense, yeah, and
Yeah.
one of our senses is eyesight, no. And, but what we're actually doing, we're just decoding like
Yeah.
electromagnetic frequencies through our senses. So if I imagine, I've never asked someone about it, but I'm now really curious that if I didn't have my eyesight, I assume that my other senses, they would be far more developed, and I could kind of see so much more, what possibly I'm able to see with the other four senses. So
Yes.
that,
Yes. 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 I had my niece actually, you know, we were talking about, you know, Helen Keller and what she can do. And she woke up, or well, before she went to bed, she told her mom, she said, before I wake up in the morning, will you get ready a blindfold type device? Because I would like to wake up with a blindfold on and go through the day without sight and just learn. It was a very beautiful thing because she wanted to learn and see what you don't see. And by the end of the day, it changed her perception of humanity and of herself and of her friend that was low vision. You know, she said, I understand. I understand. And I learned and how amazing things are different. You know, and this was just one day, but you know, the taste of an orange, how it's different when you don't have all the input. It was just different. Yeah. And it was nice, you know, at 13 to have a child come up and say, wow, what an incredible experience and how I can now understand my friend better.
Mhm. I might do that experiment, to
I
be
know
honest.
how
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's,
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
thinking it through. That would be
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
Uh, Scott, I feel we could go on for quite a bit
Yeah.
more. It's so interesting. I'm learning a lot. Thank you so much for taking your precious time and sharing all these incredible information with us. Is there is there something else you want to share with the listeners, and also are there I don't know, any projects? You just mentioned your initiative, but anything else you want to share with the world? Please do.
Sure. Sure. You know, you know, take care of yourself. You know, look for ways to heal yourself in all ways. And you know, we are always here. Our clinic's here. We're here to help, answer questions, and you know, help people find their way to um, take care and heal themselves. Um, I'll give you all the information, the websites and things. They can get in touch with us, and also about the Helen Keller Project with the American Foundation for the Blind. We're always here. Like what you said, I love your title, Beyond Perception. To take a look and just look and learn. And I thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It has been incredibly insightful. Really, thank you for educating us. And I will add all your details, web pages, whatever you provide to me, to the show notes, so that our listeners can follow you, get in touch with you, and learn more, contact you if they're interested to hear more. And yeah, from my point, thank you again. It in a sense, it's an honor to travel on this journey together. And thank you. And I have a feeling we might have another conversation at some point. Thank you.
We will, and someday we will meet in person.
Oh, that would be awesome. Yeah, I would love that.